significant differences between, you touched on this already, but between the way people train here and the way they train where you came from?
Yes, yes.
Or even just outside Okinawa, like on the mainland, for instance?
Sure.
You had a taste of that?
I have. I think the biggest observation that comes the easiest right away is when karate first went to mainland, you have to keep in mind what was happening in mainland at the time. It was gearing towards war. Everything had become militarized. All the schools were lining up in military ranks, and the seniors were shouting at the juniors, and it was almost a boot camp style environment. And then this carried over to the way that they trained karate, which was different from it. Again, people listen to their teachers here because the guys really know a lot.
Right.
I'm sure that people in mainland also know a lot.
Right.
But somewhere along the line, they've also gotten this idea that they have to line up like privates and sergeants and work that way. And that's a very big difference. And I think that most of the West's contact with karate hasn't been direct through Okinawa, but quite a lot of it has come through mainland, and it's picked up that same mainland flavor. Same thing I can say for Korea with Taekwondo as it developed again, a country that was going through war footing at the time, and still very much is on war footing.
It's pretty tense right now.
Absolutely. And I've been in Korean Taekwondo dojans, and South Lim stands up there and shouts at the troops, and they go through all their reps. And it reminds me very much of Paris Island or San Diego with the Marines, which is an effective way to get a lot of information out to a lot of people in a short period of time. Not necessarily, I think, the best way to do the follow-on later stages of training. People are less inclined to ask questions or develop their own ideas deeper. They're more inclined to just be quiet and be on the receiving end.
Right.
So that's one of the main differences that I see.
You catch a lot of them with a lot of students. It's a shame more people don't take the opportunity to ask more questions here.
Sure.
And it's vital, especially if you travel. If you're planning on coming to visit, please have questions ready.
I would say it's a balance. I mean, you can't constantly interrupt the lesson to ask the question. You need to keep things moving. But find your time. Pick the appropriate time to ask the question. And people are very, very welcome to that. Usually on the breaks in between the sets.
Exactly. We'll skip the next question. We just talked about how some of the differences between how people train on mainland Japan and here in Okinawa, and even in Korea now. So, do you think people perceive Okinawan martial arts differently back home? I mean, you mentioned the red lacquered buildings, the sensei on the pedestal. If you think we've covered that, we can move on. If you'd like to say
yeah, I
something
think we
about
have. You know, there might be a little bit of mystique back home that maybe goes beyond the reality. In many ways, the reality goes beyond the mystique. You need to come around to see it for yourself, and then you'll figure it out.
Okay. Just to quantify some things, I mean, we're all busy and we don't have time, and we make a lot of sacrifices for our training. How much training do you do in an average week?
I do 3 times a week, typically 2 to 3 hours a session, depending on the nights. We used to do a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, which is a really good rotation because you get the day off in between to let the body kind of recover. But some years back, Wednesday became a bad time slot for our teachers, so it shifted to Thursday. So often the Thursday is a little bit lighter because you want to save things for Friday. But ideally, I would say 2.5 to 3 hours, depending on how much stretching and cool down exercises you can do, and then hit it hard 3 times a week.
Nice. Okay. And when you're not in class, what kind of things would you practice?
When you're not in class, I think you always have to try to maintain your flexibility, which is something that everybody can do on their own. I think a few of us could do a better job of that, especially when we get on the wrong side of 40. I'm kind of going through that now. And just mental repetitions are things that are very easy to do. When I was first coming up through the ranks, and of course I'm still trying to make my progress, but when I had more time on my hands and didn't have responsibilities at work and things like that, I would try to do every kata 3 times a day.
Wow.
And 365 days a year, figure you'll miss a few days, but 3 times that comes out to about 1,000 repetitions a year per kata. And that's a really good foundation.
Yeah, that's extraordinary actually. Let's see, What do you think is the most important kind of practice? Not necessarily technique, but what is the most important kind of practice for your development? Like to take you to the next stage, whatever that may be. But what is the most important element in your training currently?
Let me try to answer it this way.
Okay.
And that is, progress is not like this. People reach plateaus, and then they'll have breakthroughs. And at each plateau that you reach, the thing that's going to make you find that breakthrough is going to be a little different at each stage.
Okay.
So in the beginning, just listen. So we talk about shu, ha, ri, right?
Right.
In the shu stage, you're just a sponge. Whatever somebody says, put this foot forward, do this here, do this there, you just take it.
Okay.
The next stage, ha for hana, to do a little bit of a separation. That's where you maybe start to specialize things for your own body. Yeah, to break apart.
To break apart.
And then G is like G kondo Ri, it comes again full circle to the fundamentals and something that becomes your own.
Okay.
That's kind of an esoteric way of thinking about it, but at each stage, say for instance on a punch, when we have somebody talking about how they would do the punch, we have a beginner and we might show them, okay, don't throw the shoulder out and keep it down, and there's a reason for this. And when I talk about how the tension the hand goes, and then how to use the hips to flick the hand out, and then eventually how the tangen or danken comes in on the end, and then start to work the kokyu, and then eventually how you put the weight on your feet so that everything goes in, and how the knee should be. There's always the next level that you can go through. And I tell you, even as a godan, when I'm watching my teacher and he's showing punch, one of the very first things that you can learn, there's still work left to be done. So at each of those stages, what is it going to take? In the beginning, gross movements. At the end, very, very finite internal movements, maybe the tension as it flows through the body and how you work through it. So it's going to be different for every stage as you go.
Okay, all right. Let's see here. What do you think is an appropriate level of training per week? If you had more free time, what would you like ideally to, what kind of time would you ideally like to spend? I mean, you mentioned before all of your kata 3 times a week. There's other things I'm sure you do as well. But for you to achieve your goals in martial arts, if you didn't really have the barriers of work and other appointments and things like that, what would be your ideal amount of time to spend in the dojo?
There's time in the dojo and there's effort in the dojo.
Yeah.
And if you spend 8 hours in the dojo, I think you hit a point of diminishing returns, and a lot of the time becomes unproductive.
Okay.
I think if you train really hard, say 3-hour sessions 3 times a week, you make a lot of progress with that. If you don't have to go to work the next day, an ideal situation where you can just sleep in, let your body recover, and say you're 18 years old, like I was when I first came here. I train 5 times a week, sometimes 6 times a week, double up on the Saturdays and the Sundays. You can do that when you're younger. For somebody my age, you need the recovery time. So 3 times a week, 3 hours a time, I think is good. If you're younger and you have the free time, hey, push it to 4, maybe slip another training session on the Saturdays.
Cool.